The stars had never looked so threatening. Admiral Chen Wei-lin stood on the bridge of her flagship, the UES Resolute, and watched the enemy fleet spread across her view screen like a disease. 2,000 warships. She had counted them herself, hoping the sensors were wrong. They were not wrong. The Velthari hegemony had ruled this part of the galaxy for 10,000 years. They had conquered 17 species and built an empire that stretched across 100 star systems. Humans were nothing to them. Insects, primitives who had only discovered faster than light travel 2 centuries ago. And now they wanted Earth. Admiral, her communications officer said, his voice shaking. The Velthari Grand Marshal is broadcasting again. Chen nodded. Put him through. The alien appeared on screen. Grand Marshal Vorix was tall and thin, with gray skin and 4 eyes that never blinked. His voice came through the translator, cold and certain. Humans of Earth, Vorix said. You have seen our strength. Your fleet is broken. Your defenses are meaningless. We offer you one final chance. Surrender now, and become part of the hegemony. Your people will serve us, but they will live. Refuse, and we will reduce your homeworld to ash. You have 3 days to decide. The transmission ended. Chen looked around her bridge. Her officers were trying to hide their fear, but she could see it in their eyes. They had already lost 89 ships in the first battle. The Velthari plasma weapons had cut through their shields like they were made of paper. Her fleet of 340 vessels had been reduced to 251, against 2,000 enemy warships. Admiral, her first officer said quietly. What do we do? Chen did not answer immediately. She was thinking about Earth, about the 8 billion people who were counting on her, about her daughter, who was 14 years old and had just started high school, about all the human colonies scattered across a dozen star systems. All of it would be lost if she failed. We hold the line, she said finally. We buy time for the colonies to evacuate. We make them pay for every inch of space. Her officers nodded, but she could see the truth in their faces. They were preparing to die. Then her console beeped with an incoming message. The encryption was unlike anything she had ever seen. It came from a channel that, according to official records, did not exist. She opened it privately, reading the words on her personal screen. Blackstar is go. Chen felt her heart stop. She read the words again. Certain she was mistaken. She was not mistaken. Blackstar. She had heard that name only once, 20 years ago, when she was promoted to admiral. An old man from military intelligence had taken her aside and told her something that she had never quite believed. He said that humanity had a secret, a weapon built long ago, hidden away and waiting, a weapon so powerful that it could only be used when all other options had failed. He called it the Blackstar. Chen had always thought it was a myth, a story told to make admirals feel better about impossible situations, a fairy tale for people who had run out of hope. But the message was real. The encryption was real. And somewhere, someone had decided that humanity's situation was desperate enough to wake the sleeping giant. Far away, in the asteroid belt of the Sol system, something ancient began to stir. The installation had no name on any map. It existed in a place where no satellites looked and no ships traveled. For over 100 years, a small crew had lived there in absolute secrecy, maintaining a vessel that the rest of humanity did not know existed. Captain Marcus Stone had commanded this ghost ship for 15 years. He was 62 years old now, and his hair had turned completely gray during his time in the darkness. He had accepted this assignment when he was a young man full of purpose. Now he was old, and he had begun to wonder if the call would ever come. Today, it came. All hands, Stone said over the ship's intercom, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to crack it. This is the captain. We have received activation orders. I repeat, we have received activation orders. Report to your stations immediately. We launch in 6 hours. Around him, the skeleton crew of 200 men and women began to move. Some of them were crying. Others were praying. A few were laughing with a kind of terrible joy. They had waited so long. Stone walked to the observation deck and looked at his ship. The USS Blackstar, officially designated XSV-001, was 5 kilometers long. Its hull was black, so black that it seemed to absorb the light around it. Its design was strange and terrible, full of angles that hurt the eyes and sections that seemed to fold into themselves. This ship had been built during humanity's darkest hour, when alien raiders called the Kethvori had come to harvest Earth. The nations of the world had pooled every resource, every scientist, every secret technology they possessed. They had built something that should not exist, something that broke the rules of physics, something that was designed for one purpose and one purpose only: to end wars. The Blackstar had flown once, 63 years ago. It had faced 400 HFY ships at the Battle of Titan. What happened that day was classified at the highest level. Even Stone did not know all the details. But he knew one thing for certain: no HFY survived. Now the Velthari had come with 2,000 ships. And they thought humanity was weak. They thought humans were primitives with no hope of resistance. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Stone placed his hand on the cold glass of the observation window. "Wake up, old girl," he whispered to his ship. "It's time to remind the galaxy why they should fear the dark." Deep within the Blackstar's core, lights began to flicker. Systems that had slept for decades hummed back to life. And in the heart of the vessel, something that was not quite matter and not quite energy began to spin. The beast of Earth was waking, and it was hungry. The history of the Blackstar began with death. In the year 2089, humanity learned that it was not alone in the universe. They also learned that the universe was not friendly. The HFY came without warning. Their ships appeared in Earth's orbit on a Tuesday morning, blocking out the sun over 3 continents. They did not come to talk. They did not come to trade. They came to harvest. For 10,000 years, the HFY had traveled from world to world, taking what they wanted. They ate other species, not because they needed to, but because they enjoyed it. They considered themselves the supreme predators of the galaxy, and they had never met a species that could stop them. Earth's defenses lasted 6 hours. Every missile, every nuclear weapon, every secret military project that humanity possessed was thrown at the invaders. None of it mattered. The HFY shields absorbed everything. Their weapons turned cities into craters. In 1 week, 2 billion people died. The survivors fled underground. Governments collapsed. Hope died. But in a secret bunker beneath the Swiss Alps, a woman named Dr. Elena Vasquez refused to give up. Vasquez was a theoretical physicist. She had spent her career studying things that most people considered impossible: black holes, dark matter, the fabric of space-time itself. When the HFY came, the world's governments brought her everything they had, every secret, every hidden technology, every piece of knowledge that humanity had gathered over centuries of science. They gave her one order: find a way to fight back. Vasquez worked without sleep for 3 months. She lost 20 pounds. Her hair turned white. But in the end, she found something, a possibility so dangerous that she almost destroyed her notes rather than share them. She had discovered how to weaponize gravity itself. Not gravity as most people understood it. Not the gentle force that kept people's feet on the ground. No. Vasquez had found a way to create controlled singularities, tiny black holes that could be aimed and fired like bullets, gravitational fields that could crush starships into balls the size of marbles. The technology was insane. It was unstable. It required materials that barely existed and energy sources that had never been built. But it was possible. The nations of Earth came together for the first and last time in human history. Every resource was dedicated to a single project. Factories worked day and night. Scientists died from exhaustion. Millions of people sacrificed everything they had. In 18 months, they built the Blackstar. The ship was ugly. It was not designed for beauty or comfort. Every inch of its 5-kilometer hull served one purpose: to deliver death on a scale that the galaxy had never seen. Its main weapon was a gravity lance that could fire concentrated singularities across thousands of kilometers. Its secondary weapons included gravity bombs, spatial distortion fields, and defensive systems that could bend light and time around the hull. Captain James Rodriguez was chosen to command the vessel. He was a quiet man who had lost his entire family to the HFY. When he saw the Blackstar for the first time, he did not smile. He simply nodded and said, "Let's go kill them all." The Battle of Titan lasted 11 minutes. The HFY had gathered 400 ships near Saturn's largest moon, preparing for their final assault on Earth. They detected the Blackstar approaching but did not consider it a threat. 1 ship against 400? The humans had clearly gone mad with despair. They changed their minds when the gravity lance fired. The first shot did not merely destroy a HFY ship. It compressed the vessel and everything inside it into a point smaller than a grain of sand. The matter simply ceased to exist in any meaningful form. 30 HFY ships were caught in the gravitational wake and torn apart like paper in a hurricane. The aliens tried to fight back. Their weapons, which had seemed so powerful against Earth's defenses, could not touch the Blackstar. The ship existed partially outside normal space. Missiles froze in midair. Energy beams curved around the hull. Nothing could reach it. In 11 minutes, 400 ships were destroyed. The HFY species was effectively extinct. The few survivors fled to the edges of the galaxy and were never seen again. Humanity had won, but the celebration was short. The world's leaders looked at what they had created, and they were afraid. The Blackstar was too powerful. It could not be controlled by any single nation. It could not be trusted to anyone's hands. If it fell into the wrong hands, it could destroy Earth as easily as it had destroyed the HFY. So they made a decision. The Blackstar would be hidden. Its existence would be classified at the highest level. Its crew would be sworn to secrecy. The ship would wait in the darkness, maintained by a skeleton crew, ready to wake if humanity ever faced extinction again. For 63 years, the secret held. Captain Marcus Stone thought about this history as he walked through the Blackstar's corridors. He had read the classified files. He knew what his ship had done. He knew what it could do. "Captain," his first officer said, falling into step beside him, "the crew is ready. All systems are online. We can launch within the hour." Stone nodded. "What about the Singularity Core? Stable and charging. We'll be at full power by the time we reach Kepler's gate." Stone stopped walking. He looked at his first officer, a woman named Sarah Chen who had served with him for 12 years. She was loyal and competent, and she had never asked to leave this assignment, even when it seemed like they would spend their entire lives waiting. "Sarah," he said quietly, "do you know why I took this command?" She shook her head. "Because I believed that if this ship ever flew again, it should be commanded by someone who hated the idea. Someone who would use it only as a last resort. Someone who would never enjoy what it could do." He started walking again. "The Velthari have 2,000 ships. We're going to destroy most of them. Maybe all of them. Millions of aliens are going to die because they made the mistake of threatening humanity. They gave us no choice, sir." "No, they didn't. But that doesn't make it easier." He paused at the door to the bridge. "When this is over, I want you to remember something. We're not heroes. We're not saviors. We're just people who were given a terrible weapon and forced to use it." He opened the door and stepped onto the bridge. "All hands, prepare for launch. Set course for Kepler's gate. Maximum speed." The Blackstar rose from its hiding place like a monster rising from the deep. Its engines blazed with light that was somehow darker than the space around it, and as it accelerated toward the distant battle, Captain Stone sat in his command chair and prepared himself for the thing he had spent 15 years praying he would never have to do. He was going to war. Grand Marshal Vorax was enjoying his victory. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and watched the human fleet huddle near the Kepler's gate wormhole. They had pulled back after the first battle, their pathetic ships too damaged to fight. Now they were simply waiting to die. 3 days. He had given them 3 days to surrender. It was more generous than most species deserved. The hegemony usually did not offer terms at all. They simply conquered and moved on. But Vorax wanted the humans to understand. He wanted them to know, deep in their primitive hearts, that resistance was pointless. When they finally surrendered, he wanted them broken in spirit as well as body. "Grand Marshal," one of his sensor officers called out, "we are detecting an anomaly." Vorax turned, annoyed at the interruption. "What kind of anomaly?" "A gravity signature, sir, emerging from human space." The officer's 4 eyes blinked rapidly as he studied his console. "It's large." "How large?" "I cannot determine exactly, sir. Our sensors are having difficulty reading it. The signature is either malfunctioning or—" The officer trailed off. "Or what?" "Or we are detecting something the size of a small moon." Vorax walked to the sensor station and looked at the readings himself. The officer was correct. The gravity signature was enormous, far larger than any ship the hegemony had ever built. But the humans had nothing like this in their fleet. Their largest vessels were barely a kilometer long. "It must be a sensor error," Vorax said. "Run a diagnostic." Before the officer could respond, another voice called out from across the bridge. "Sir, visual confirmation. Something has dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly between our fleet and the human position." The main view screen flickered and changed. Vorax looked at it and felt something he had not felt in centuries of warfare. He felt confused. The ship that hung in space before him was unlike anything in the hegemony database. It was 5 kilometers long, shaped like a blade made of shadow. Its hull was black, not painted black, but actually black, as if it absorbed all light that touched it. There were no visible weapons, ports, no engine signatures, no identifying marks of any kind. It simply existed, silent, patient, waiting. "What is that?" Vorax demanded. No one answered. No one knew. Far away, on the bridge of the UES Resolute, Admiral Chen stared at the same image with tears forming in her eyes. "It's real," she whispered. "It's actually real." The Blackstar hung between the two fleets like a knife waiting to fall. Its presence changed everything. The Velthari formation, so confident moments ago, was now uncertain. Ships were moving out of position as captains tried to get a better look at the strange vessel. Chen opened a private channel. "Captain Stone, this is Admiral Chen. Can you hear me?" Stone's voice came through, calm and steady. "I hear you, Admiral. Sorry for the dramatic entrance. We thought it might get their attention." "It certainly got mine." Chen paused. "Captain, I have to ask, what are your orders? What are you authorized to do?" "My orders are simple, Admiral. Ensure human survival. The methodology is at my discretion. And if they surrender, then they survive too. We're not here to commit genocide, Admiral. We're here to end a war." Chen nodded, even though Stone could not see her. "What do you need from me? Keep your fleet back. Do not engage under any circumstances. This fight is ours." On the Eternal Dominion, Grand Marshal Vorax had recovered from his initial surprise. He was angry now. How dare these humans try to intimidate him with one ship, no matter how large? The hegemony had conquered species that fielded thousands of vessels. One strange ship meant nothing. "Forward, squadron," he commanded. "Move to intercept the unknown vessel. Destroy it, and show these primitives the cost of defiance." 50 Velthari warships broke formation and accelerated toward the Blackstar. They were fast and deadly, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy a city. Their plasma lances charged with killing light. Their crews were confident and eager. They had no idea what they were flying toward. Captain Stone watched them come. His crew was silent, their hands hovering over their controls. The weapons officer, a young man named David Park, looked at him with questioning eyes. "Sir," Park said, "they'll be in weapons range in 30 seconds. Stone did not respond immediately. He was watching the enemy ships, counting them, calculating trajectories. Part of him hoped they would turn back. Part of him knew they would not. "Captain," Park said again, "orders?" Stone closed his eyes for a moment. He thought about his crew. He thought about the billions of humans waiting back on Earth. He thought about Admiral Chen and her battered fleet. He thought about all the people who were counting on him to do something terrible. Then he opened his eyes. "Weapons free," he said quietly. "Single lance, minimum power." The Blackstar's prow began to change. Sections of the hull folded outward like the petals of a dark flower, revealing something at the ship's heart that should not exist in normal space. It looked like a hole in reality itself, a sphere of absolute darkness surrounded by rings of exotic matter that sparked and crackled with impossible energy. The Singularity Core, the most powerful weapon humanity had ever built. The 50 Velthari ships continued their approach. Their captains saw the opening prow but did not understand what it meant. They assumed it was some kind of docking bay or shuttle launch. They were wrong. A beam of twisted light shot from the Blackstar's core. It was not quite visible, more like a line where space itself was being bent and broken. It touched the lead Velthari ship for less than a second. The ship did not explode. It did not break apart. It simply compressed. The entire vessel, all 200 meters of it, collapsed into a point smaller than a human fist. The matter that had made up the ship was crushed into something denser than anything that existed in nature. Then it was gone, vanished into a micro-singularity that flickered out of existence as quickly as it had formed. The other 49 ships had no time to react. The gravitational wake from the lance spread outward like ripples in a pond. Ships caught in the wake were torn apart by tidal forces. Metal screamed and bent. Hulls cracked open like eggs. Bodies were pulled into the void. In 4 seconds, the entire squadron ceased to exist. On the Eternal Dominion, Grand Marshal Vorix watched the destruction with all four of his eyes wide open. His crew was silent. The bridge was filled with the soft sounds of emergency alarms from sensors that could not process what they had just witnessed. 50 ships. Gone. In 4 seconds. What? Vorix's voice was barely a whisper. What did they just do? No one answered. No one could. On the Blackstar, Captain Stone sat back in his chair. His face showed no satisfaction, no triumph, only a deep and terrible sadness. Open a channel to the Velthari fleet, he said. All frequencies. The communications officer nodded. Channel open. Sir. Stone leaned forward and spoke to the enemy that had threatened his species with extinction. This is Captain Marcus Stone of the USS Blackstar. What you have just witnessed was our weapon system operating at minimum power. I am asking you, not threatening. Asking to withdraw your forces and accept peaceful terms. There is no need for further death. He paused, letting the words sink in. Please, do not make me do this again. The galaxy held its breath, waiting for the Velthari response. Grand Marshal Vorix made his choice in anger. He had ruled the Velthari fleets for 200 years. He had conquered 11 species. He had never lost a battle, never retreated, never shown weakness. The hegemony had not become the greatest power in the galaxy by surrendering to tricks and illusions. All ships, he commanded, his voice hard with fury. Full assault. Destroy that vessel. Show these humans what happens when they challenge the hegemony. 1,950 warships moved as one. They spread across space in a formation designed to overwhelm any defense. Plasma lances charged. Missile bays opened. The combined firepower of the Velthari fleet could have cracked a planet's crust. On the Resolute, Admiral Chen watched in horror. Stone. They're coming. All of them. I see them, Admiral. Stone's voice was calm, almost resigned. Stay where you are. This won't take long. The Velthari fleet closed the distance quickly. At 5,000 kilometers, they opened fire. Thousands of plasma bolts and missiles streaked toward the Blackstar, filling space with light and death. It was the largest barrage the hegemony had ever launched at a single target. None of it mattered. The Blackstar's defensive systems activated. Space around the ship seemed to shimmer and bend. Missiles that should have struck the hull instead curved away, caught in gravitational fields that redirected their momentum. Plasma bolts stretched and twisted, their photons trapped in pockets of distorted space-time. Energy beams bent around the ship like water flowing around a stone. Nothing touched the hull. Nothing even came close. Sir, the Blackstar's weapons officer reported, enemy fire is completely ineffective. Defensive grid is operating at 12% capacity. Stone nodded slowly. He had hoped the display would make the Velthari reconsider. He had hoped they would see that their weapons were useless and choose to retreat. But the enemy fleet kept coming. They kept firing. They would not stop until they were victorious or dead. Very well, Stone said. All weapons systems, full engagement. Prioritize command vessels and weapons platforms. Try to minimize casualties. He knew it was a foolish thing to say. There was no way to minimize casualties when you were destroying a fleet of 2,000 ships. But he had to say it. He had to believe that he was still trying to be merciful, even as he prepared to kill millions. The Blackstar unleashed its full arsenal. Gravity lances fired in rapid succession, each beam crushing ships into nothingness. Singularity torpedoes launched from hidden bays, crossing the distance to enemy vessels in seconds before detonating and creating temporary black holes that swallowed everything within a kilometer. Spatial compression fields expanded outward, folding entire squadrons into impossible geometries that crushed hulls and killed crews. The Velthari fleet began to die. Admiral Chen watched from the Resolute, unable to look away. She had seen battles before. She had seen ships destroyed and crews killed. But she had never seen anything like this. The Blackstar was not fighting the Velthari fleet, it was erasing it. Ships vanished by the dozens. Some were compressed into points of matter denser than stars. Others were torn apart by gravitational tides, their pieces scattered across thousands of kilometers. Still others simply folded in on themselves, crushed by forces that warped the fabric of reality. And through it all, the Blackstar moved with terrible grace. It did not dodge or weave. It did not need to. It simply advanced through the enemy formation, dealing death in every direction. 1 hour passed. 500 Velthari ships were destroyed. 2 hours passed. Another 300 joined them. Grand Marshal Vorik stood on his bridge, watching his fleet die. The Eternal Dominion had taken up position at the rear of the formation, protected by layers of escorts and heavy cruisers. But even from this distance, he could see the destruction clearly. His officers were panicking. Some were calling for retreat. Others were praying to gods that the Veltari had not worshipped in centuries. A few had simply gone silent, their minds unable to process what they were witnessing. Grand Marshal, his first officer said, his voice shaking, "We have lost over 800 ships. Our weapons are completely ineffective. We must retreat." "Retreat to where?" Vorik snapped. "If that ship can do this, it can follow us anywhere. It can destroy our homeworlds. It can end our species. Then what do we do?" Vorik did not answer. For the first time in his long life, he had no answer to give. 3 hours into the battle, the Blackstar stopped firing. Captain Stone looked at the tactical display. Over 800 Velthari ships had been destroyed. The remaining 1,200 had scattered, their formation broken, their crews terrified. Many were trying to flee, but their faster-than-light drives needed time to charge. "Open a channel," Stone said. Same frequencies as before. He waited until the light indicated that the channel was open. Then he spoke, and his voice was heavy with exhaustion and sorrow. "Grand Marshal Vorik, I am asking you again to surrender. Your fleet has been reduced by almost half. Your weapons cannot harm my ship. If you continue this fight, I will be forced to destroy every vessel under your command." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I do not want to do this. I have no hatred for your people. But I will not allow you to threaten humanity. I will not allow you to enslave or destroy my species. If you force me to choose between your fleet and my people, I will choose my people every time." Another pause. "This one longer. Please. End this. Accept defeat. Go home to your families and live. There has been enough death today." On the Eternal Dominion, Grand Marshal Vorik listened to the human's words. Part of him wanted to keep fighting. Part of him wanted to die with honor rather than accept defeat from a species he had considered inferior. But as he looked at the tactical display, at the hundreds of destroyed ships, at the thousands of dead crew members, at the enemy vessel that hung in space without a single scratch on its hull, he realized something. This was not a battle. This was an execution. And the executioner was asking him, with something that sounded almost like kindness, to stop walking toward the blade. "All ships," Vorik said quietly. "Cease fire. Power down weapon systems." His officers stared at him in shock. In 200 years, he had never given such an order. "Sir?" his first officer asked. Vorik closed his 4 eyes. "We are done. Signal our surrender." On the Blackstar, Captain Stone received the message. He did not smile. He did not celebrate. He simply nodded and gave the order to stand down. "Admiral Chen," he said over the command channel, "the Velthari fleet has surrendered. Please begin coordinating with their command vessel for terms." Chen's voice came back, thick with emotion. "Captain Stone, Marcus, you saved us. You saved all of us." "No, Admiral, I just ended a war." Stone stood from his command chair and looked at the view screen, at the scattered remnants of the Velthari fleet, at the debris field that marked the graves of hundreds of ships. The saving was already done by the people who built this ship and the crew who maintained her. "I just pulled the trigger." He turned away from the screen. "I'm going to my quarters. Let me know when the surrender terms are finalized." He walked off the bridge without another word. His crew watched him go, not sure if they should cheer or mourn. They had won. Humanity had won. But victory, they were learning, did not always feel like victory. The galaxy changed overnight. When news of the Battle of Kepler's Gate spread, civilizations that had stood for thousands of years began to crumble. The Velthari hegemony, which had ruled through fear and overwhelming force, suddenly found itself weak. 3 of its member species declared independence within a week. 5 more began secret negotiations with human ambassadors. The balance of power that had held for 10,000 years was shattered, and at the center of that destruction stood a single species that everyone had underestimated: humanity. Ambassador Sarah Okonkwo arrived at the Velthari flagship 2 days after the battle. She was a small woman with gray hair and calm eyes, chosen for this mission because she was known for finding peaceful solutions to impossible problems. As her shuttle docked with the Eternal Dominion, She wondered if peace was still possible after so much death. Grand Marshal Voryx met her in his private chambers. He looked older than he had in the broadcasts, his gray skin pale and his 4 eyes tired. He had lost more than a battle. He had lost everything he believed about his place in the universe. "Ambassador," he said, his voice flat. "I did not expect humanity to send a diplomat. I expected executioners." Okonkwo sat across from him, her hands folded in her lap. "We are not here to execute anyone, Grand Marshal. We are here to end a war. You have already ended it. Your weapon saw to that." Voryx's voice was bitter. 1,847 ships destroyed. Over 4 million of my people dead. The greatest defeat in hegemony history. I know. And I am sorry. Voryx looked at her sharply. "Sorry? Your species faces extinction. You destroy our fleet. And you are sorry?" "Of course I am. Those were living beings who died out there. They had families. They had hopes and fears and dreams. The fact that they were trying to kill us does not make their deaths meaningless." She leaned forward slightly. "Grand Marshal, I want you to understand something. Humanity did not want this war. We did not seek you out. We did not threaten your territory or your people. You came to us. You demanded our surrender. You gave us no choice but to fight. And your weapon? How long have you had it?" Okonkwo was silent for a moment. Then she answered honestly. "Since before we achieved faster than light travel. Since before we knew you existed. We built the Blackstar because we knew that someday, someone would come to conquer us. We were never the primitives you believed us to be. We were simply hoping we would never need to prove otherwise." Voryx absorbed this information slowly. The humans had built a weapon capable of destroying fleets before they even knew other species existed. They had hidden it for centuries, waiting for a threat worthy of its power, and when that threat came, they had used it with devastating precision. They were not primitives. They were predators wearing the mask of prey. "What are your terms?" Voryx asked finally. The terms, when Okonkwo presented them, were surprisingly gentle. Freedom of navigation through human space, mutual non-aggression treaties, exchange of prisoners, war reparations paid over 200 years rather than demanded immediately, no territorial conquests, no forced disarmament, no occupation of Velthari worlds. "This is not conquest," Voryx said, confused. "These are the terms of equals." "Yes. Why? You could take everything. You could destroy the hegemony completely." Okonkwo smiled sadly. "And then what? Rule an empire of resentful subjects who hate us? Spend centuries fighting rebellions and crushing dissent? That is not who we want to be, Grand Marshal. We want to be neighbors. Trading partners. Perhaps. Someday. Friends." "Friends?" Voryx could not keep the disbelief from his voice. "After what happened here, peace must start somewhere. Why not here? Why not now?" The negotiations took 3 days. When they were finished, Voryx signed the surrender documents with a hand that barely shook. He had entered this war expecting to add another slave species to the hegemony. He was leaving it with his people humbled but intact. It was more than he deserved. He knew that. Meanwhile, the Blackstar prepared for its journey home. Captain Stone stood on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. Behind him, the debris field from the battle still glittered with the remains of destroyed ships. Soon, cleanup crews would arrive to collect the wreckage and recover any bodies that could be found. But for now, the graveyard hung in space, silent and terrible. Admiral Chen joined him at the window. She had aged years in the past week, her face lined with stress and exhaustion. "The government wants to give you a medal," she said. "The Grand Cross of Valor. It's the highest honor we can award." "I don't want a medal." "I know. I told them you would say that." She stood beside him, looking out at the same stars. "What do you want, Marcus?" Stone thought about the question for a long time. "I want to go back to my hiding place in the asteroids. I want to put the Blackstar back to sleep, and hope that no one ever needs to wake her again. I want to spend whatever years I have left maintaining a ship that never flies, and praying that humanity has learned enough to avoid another war like this one." He turned to look at her. "I killed more people today than any human in history, Admiral. I don't want a medal for that. I want forgiveness, and I want to make sure it never happens again." Chen nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. You saved us. Maybe. Or maybe I just proved that humanity is as capable of terrible violence as any species in the galaxy." He looked back at the stars. The Velthari thought we were primitives. Now they know the truth. We're not primitives. We're survivors. And survivors do whatever it takes to live. The Blackstar departed the next morning. It did not use the Kepler's Gate wormhole like other ships. Instead, it simply accelerated into deep space and vanished, its destination unknown to anyone except its crew. The legend, however, remained. 1 year later, a Velthari historian named Korith traveled to human space to study the war. She interviewed dozens of people, admirals, diplomats, soldiers, civilians. She collected data and testimony and tried to understand how a species that had seemed so weak had hidden such devastating power. At the end of her research, she sat down with a human diplomat named Thomas Reeves and asked him the question that had haunted her for months. The Blackstar, is it real? Or is it propaganda? Reeves smiled. It was not a cruel smile, but it was not a warm one either. Let me tell you something, historian Korith. Humanity spent its entire existence looking up at the stars. We wondered if we were alone. We wondered if anything was out there that might want to hurt us. We hoped for the best, but we prepared for the worst. He leaned back in his chair, and in all that time, across all those centuries of wondering and hoping and fearing, we did something that no other species in this galaxy seems to have done. What was that? We prepared. He stood and walked to the window of his office, looking out at the city below. Humans walked the streets, living their lives, unaware of how close they had come to extinction. The Blackstar is real, historian. It exists, and it waits. And as long as it waits, no one will ever threaten humanity again. Korith returned to Velthari space with her research complete. Her report was read by every leader in the former hegemony, and when they finished reading, they all came to the same conclusion. The humans were not to be threatened. Not now. Not ever. Because somewhere in the darkness between stars, a ship was waiting. A ship built by a species that had learned to fear the universe long before the universe learned to fear them. And in the halls of power across 100 worlds, a new saying began to spread. It was spoken in whispers, passed from diplomat to diplomat, leader to leader, a warning to anyone who might think of challenging the small blue planet called Earth. Do not wake the sleeping beast, for they have already dreamed of your destruction and built the means to achieve it. The stars had never looked so peaceful, and the Blackstar waited, patient and eternal. In the dark,